It wasn't even a case of worrying that I was going to upset my neighbors. I was kind of worried about getting arrested. It was so loud. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Nano Cortex is an absolute game changer for guitarists. That being said, for me personally, if I'm given the choice, I'm always going to take an amp over a modeler. And trust me, I've tried them all. I started with this, the HX Stomp, brilliant, but kind of limited in terms of the number of effects and blocks I could run. And then I got this, which is the Helix. It's a bit dusty. I do still use it. I then moved on to the Nano Cortex. Never actually taken the Nano Cortex to a gig, but that's about to change, and I'll tell you why. So recently, for one of the bands that I play in, it's a country band, I've stopped using the Helix, I'm still using the amp, and I've just gone kind of back to where it all began. I built a pedalboard, and this is it. Kind of plugged in on a short cable, so I'm holding it funny. But essentially, it's pretty simple. I have a tuner, I have a low gain drive in the ODR1, I have a higher gain drive in the SD1 Waza, which is incredible. I then have Free the Tone Flight Time. This isn't mine, it's a loan, but I'm desperately trying to get my hands on one. And I'm using possibly the most expensive boost pedal known to man, which is actually an excellent drive in the J-Rocket Melody. But I'm using it with pretty much no gain, and I'm using it as a boost. Anyway, it's not about the board. What this is really about is I have a few gigs, a few regular gigs that are at really small venues. When I say really small venues, the venue itself isn't that small, but the stage is particularly small. And when there's 7 of you in a band and you're all trying to cram onto a stage, you need every inch of space that you can get your hands on. And I have to be honest, when I'm taking my Viceroy LT, which is a 40-watt tube amp, it's pretty big, it's pretty heavy, but I love it. And the Helix, which is what I've been using up until building the pedalboard, it's quite a lot of space. So when I have the tube amp with a microphone on it, I use the SM57 live, and I use like an amp clamp kind of arm. It sticks out quite far, and I walk into it quite a lot. So I'm knocking the mic, I'm risking damaging the amp. Long story short, I want to try and do a gig with the Nano Cortex. I want to lose the amp, lose the pedal board. I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to do that, just to give it a go, just to see what it's like. So I'm going to take another capture of my amp. In fact, I've done it, I'm speaking to you from the future. But I'm doing it slightly differently. And the reason for that is I made another video recently where I talked about, can a capture compare to a real amp? And the short answer was no, but it does come really, really close. And what I essentially found was that the capture, it was losing quite a bit of low end over the actual tube amp. And I've been thinking about how can I get over this? How can I get past this? And usually it's not a problem, but if I'm playing straight into front of house, or I'm playing into the FR12, I kind of want as much frequency range available to me as possible. So what I did was I took another capture with the SM57, but I also used a second microphone. So the classic combination for recording guitar amps, you know, depending on who you ask, depending on what type of music you like, it's typically a Shure SM57 and a Royer R121 ribbon microphone. Now, for anyone that's tried to get their hands on one of these ribbon microphones, whilst they are readily available, they are incredibly expensive. Here in the UK, they're over £1,200, and if I had that amount of money to spend on music gear, I'd probably spend it on a guitar before I spent it on a microphone. So instead, I decided to do a bit of research and see what else was available, see what other ribbon mics could I get my hands on for less than the cost of the Royer R121. And I found lots of great microphones that were available, the Royer R10, the Bear Dynamic M160, lots of really great recommendations. And then I stumbled across a video on YouTube where it was somebody comparing a microphone from Thomann to the Royer R121. And I had a listen to it, and all of the feedback was it sounds really, really close, but it's missing a bit of the high end. Now for me, if I'm recording an amp with two microphones, especially if I'm using an SM57, I know the SM57 is going to be great for getting that kind of mid-range, that kind of top end clarity, but it's not going to be so great at capturing those lower mids, that bottom end. That is where the ribbon microphone comes in. So all of the feedback, all of the kind of comments and stuff on this Thomann microphone were, sounds like the Royer doesn't have the high end. Not a problem. I do not need the high end from this microphone. So I decided to pull the trigger. It was not a difficult decision to make, considering, as I said, the Royer R121 is £1,200. This one cost me £66. Now I did have to buy a FET amp with this, which is essentially an inline solid state amplifier, which allows me to take phantom power and boost the gain on the ribbon mic without damaging it. So it was slightly more expensive, but it was still around £100 UK. So I decided to use both microphones. I did some recording with them, absolutely blown away. If people are interested, I can do a video on recording with those microphones, but there are, plenty of good resources out there. Highly recommend the Rick Beato video on recording guitar amps. That's probably the best one. So I did some recording. I found that the R121 lookalike did an incredible job, and it sounded fantastic. It really added a whole new dimension to my guitar recordings, which was exactly what I wanted. That then gave me the idea of seeing if I could translate this into a capture. So that's exactly what I did. I have mic'd up the guitar amp, I used both microphones, I then set it up in Logic so that I kind of blended the mics, typically run the SM57 a bit quieter than the, I keep going to say Royer, than the ribbon microphone, than the T-Bone, which is the one that I used. This gives you a really nice balanced sound. What I then decided to do was sum the signals and send that summed mono signal into the Nano Cortex. I'm really sorry, this is turning into a massive science experiment. It was never my intention, but that is the way things go. I then took a capture of the amp, and let me just show you kind of what my process was. So the mics are set up, the amp is cooking. I've now opened up a Logic session just to check the levels. I'm also going to quickly record some guitar and make sure that the microphones are in phase, and then make any adjustments if necessary. So now I'm just going to make sure I'm happy with the guitar tone. I'm just using my PRS Custom 24 just to check this. Got it on the bridge pickup. Let's hear how it sounds. I'll just check the neck pickup as well. Okay, I think we're good to go. One thing I have done is I had the master volume on full on the amp just to get the most headroom. Okay, me again. Just to quickly add, this was a terrible idea. Whilst cranking the amp does give me an incredible amount of headroom, like it takes a long time to break up, there's a lot of gain in this amp, it was just way too loud. Like, I was taking the capture and it wasn't even a case of worrying that I was going to upset my neighbors. I was kind of worried about getting arrested. It was so loud. So I had to cancel the capture because it was a little bit frightening. And then I dropped the master down to halfway. It was still too loud. So I covered the amp. It was still too loud. So I ended up dropping the master volume down to about 9 o'clock. So nowhere near where I wanted to get it, but essentially still enough to get a really great tone, get what I needed from it. And it really did translate well into the capture in the end. So it was all good. I've got the capture and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. It's turned out much better than it did with just the 57. So I'm kind of glad I went through all of the faff of getting everything routed and summing both of the signals from both microphones into the Nano Cortex. It was probably overkill. I'm probably going to low pass, high pass everything at the gig anyway and not actually need that low end, but it's there if I ever need it. So that brings me on to, what do I do next? I essentially have two choices. I can add the Nano Cortex back onto this board and essentially use it in line with my real pedals, or I can use the effects that are built into the Nano Cortex. So as I said, I have this gig this weekend. It's tomorrow actually, and I just want to use as kind of few components, as few bits of gear as possible. I'm going to use the Nano Cortex. I'm going to go straight into front of house. I'm not going to use my amp, which saddens me. I'm not going to use an FR speaker. Just going to go direct. I'm going to be on in-ears anyway, and I'm stood like right next to the amp, so I can't really hear it. I can feel it, but I can't hear it. And then for my switching, I have two options. I can either create multiple presets on the Nano Cortex and use the 2 foot switches, so I can have essentially 4 presets and switch between them using those 2 switches. I don't really like this because you cannot necessarily go between every single combination as you'd like it to. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one preset, and I'm going to use this. This is the Airstep CTX. Now, you might have seen these before. They're from a company called Xsonic, and they make them for lots of different modelers, lots of different pieces of gear. But this video isn't about the Airstep. I'm going to make another video about this once I've gigged it and really tried it out. But what this does allow me to do is essentially use the effects on the Nano Cortex. In fact, I'll show you what I've done. The way I've got it set up is I've got 2 guitar overdrives. So here I'm using a blues driver. You can see I've got the gain set very low on this one. This is kind of my edge of breakup, kind of low gain tone. Essentially it's doing what the ODR one does on my actual board. Next I've got this exotic drive. I need to check to see what that actually is. I'll flash it up if anyone's interested. And I've got a bit more gain on this one. It's a bit chunkier. It's not louder, it's just more gain. I then have a 9-band equalizer. Now, this isn't doing a lot. This is actually doing a bit of a mid boost. You can see here on 1K and 2K. And I have the output set to 2.7 dB. The reason I've done this is my solo boost. So if I am going into a solo, regardless of if I'm using clean, low gain, high gain sound, I can kick this on as a separate effect, as I do with the melody, and essentially give myself a few extra dB for the solo, which is great. I then have a delay. Now this delay is, you can see I have the sync on, so it's tempo synced, quite low mix, quite low feedback. This is just something that I like to kick on a couple of times throughout the set. The reason I've got it tempo synced is with this I can actually do a tap tempo. So before the song starts, when the drummer's counting us in, I can just tap in and kind of update it if the band drifts at all. And then finally I have this Mindhall reverb. It's, yeah, I don't know why it's called Mindhall. It's good, it's fine. But essentially I use the spring reverb on the amp. This is just something else that I can use. So the nice thing about this is I can then use the this Airstep to essentially flick on and off each of the drives. So I've got drive 1, drive 2, this is my boost. I then have my delay, and then this one here actually changes between effect and preset mode. So if I wanted to change between presets, I would hit that one. I must be careful not to touch this one during the during the gig. If everything goes blue, there's a problem. Now you can probably see there's no wires. This is a completely wireless unit. It has a battery in there, but I can also power it off of 9 volts. And it does have a couple of expression inputs as well. So if I did want to use like a wah effect or a volume pedal, I could do that, but I don't need these for this gig, so it's not something I'm going to set up. So that's essentially it. I'm going to take the Nano Cortex and the Airstep to the gig tomorrow. Fingers crossed it goes okay. It could be a terrible mistake, but there's only really one way to find out. So yeah, I'm gonna make another video on the Airstep, so keep a lookout for that one. That one will be next. And I'll also I guess I'll do a bit of a review on sort of how the gig went, how I found gigging the Nano Cortex. So again, if that's of interest, make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment below to let me know what you'd like to see in the next one. But as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for checking out the video. Give it a like, do all the good stuff. It does really help me out, and I will see you in the next one. Go play your guitar.